The Zephyrian homeworld of Kepler 442b hung like a wounded jewel against the black canvas of space, its once pristine blue atmosphere now streaked with the ugly brown scars of orbital bombardment. Admiral This's Kara stood in the command center of the evacuation vessel Times Mercy's Wing *, her forearms trembling as she watched another transport ship explode in a brilliant flash of white light. "That's the 7th medical transport we've lost today," reported her aide, Lieutenant Vexthal, his voice barely containing the despair that had infected their entire fleet. The Korthak Empire isn't distinguishing between military and civilian vessels anymore. This's Kara's compound eyes tracked the movement of enemy fighters as they swarmed through the debris field that had once been her people's orbital hospitals. The Korthak had been systematically destroying every medical facility, every rescue ship, every glimmer of hope her species had managed to cling to during this 3-month siege. "Status report on the refugee camps?" she asked, though she dreaded the answer. "Surface camps 7 through 12 have gone silent. We estimate 40,000 civilians trapped in the remaining shelters, but our medical supplies are nearly depleted. The wounded." Vexthal paused, his voice catching. "Admiral, we have over 12,000 injured who will die without proper treatment. Our field medics are doing what they can, but we lack the equipment, the medicines, the expertise for injuries this severe." The Zephyrian species had always been peaceful explorers and traders, their medical knowledge focused on healing rather than trauma surgery. They had never encountered wounds caused by plasma artillery, radiation burns from antimatter explosions, or the psychological damage inflicted by months of relentless warfare. Their gentle nature, which had made them welcome throughout the galaxy as skilled diplomats and merchants, now seemed like a cruel joke as their children died from wounds their doctors couldn't treat. "Have we received any response from the Galactic Medical Coalition?" This's Kara asked, though she knew the answer would bring little comfort. "The Altarian medical ships were destroyed en route 3 days ago. The Centauran hospital ships turned back after losing half their fleet to Korthak ambushes. The Andromedans." Vexthal's voice grew even quieter. "The Andromedans sent their regrets, and a promise to accept refugees who can make it to their territory." This's Kara felt her heart sink. The Andromedans controlled space lanes 3 months away at conventional speed. Her people would be extinct long before any survivors could reach their borders. "There is one other option, Admiral," Vexthal said hesitantly. "The humans." A strange silence fell over the command center. Everyone knew about humanity, of course. The young species that had joined the galactic community barely 50 standard years ago, emerging from a small blue world in the Orion Arm with an enthusiasm that many older civilizations found both charming and naive. They had been eager to help, eager to learn, eager to prove themselves worthy of membership in the vast community of spacefaring peoples. But they were so new, so inexperienced. What could they possibly offer that the ancient Altarians or the wise Centaurans could not? "The humans have responded to our distress call," Vexthal continued. "They're offering to send medical assistance." "Medical assistance?" This's Kara almost laughed, but the sound came out as a bitter clicking. What could humans possibly know about treating Zephyrian physiology? They've barely figured out their own biology. How many human doctors have even seen a Zephyrian before, let alone treated one for combat injuries? "Perhaps," suggested Communications Officer Ral Theta from her station, "we could send them detailed anatomical data? Their computers could help their medical staff adapt their techniques." This's Kara considered this. Human technology was surprisingly advanced for such a young species, and their artificial intelligence systems had impressed even the ancient vegan collective. But medical knowledge wasn't something that could be simply downloaded and applied. It required years of training, intuitive understanding of biological systems, and experience with countless variations and complications. "How long until they arrive?" she asked. "They estimate 4 days at maximum velocity," Vexthal replied. 4 days. This's Kara looked at the tactical display, showing Korthak forces tightening their grip around the planet. In 4 days, there might be nothing left to save. But what choice did they have? "Send our medical databases to the human fleet," she ordered. "Include everything. Anatomical charts, common diseases, pharmaceutical data, surgical procedures. If they're coming to help, Give them every advantage we can. As her crew began transmitting terabytes of medical data toward the approaching human fleet, Thisiskara tried to prepare herself for disappointment. The humans meant well, but good intentions wouldn't save her people from bleeding out in underground bunkers. Still, she had to admire their courage. Most species would have offered sympathy and safe harbor for any refugees who managed to escape. Only the humans had volunteered to fly directly into a war zone to help strangers they'd never met. Hours passed in a blur of emergency reports and desperate rescue attempts. The Korthak forces seemed to sense that help was coming and intensified their attacks. 3 more refugee camps went silent. The remaining medical transports huddled behind the shattered remains of the orbital defense platforms, afraid to venture out into the killing field that space around Kepler 442b had become. Then Lieutenant Vexthal's voice cut through the chaos with an urgency that made everyone turn. "Admiral, I'm detecting gravitational distortions at the edge of the system. Something big is coming out of hyperspace." Thisiskara felt her heart skip. "The human medical ships? I'm not sure, Admiral. The signatures are larger than expected. Much larger." The main view screen flickered as long-range sensors struggled to penetrate the exotic energy patterns surrounding the hyperspace emergence point. Slowly, shapes began to resolve from the quantum foam. What they saw defied all expectations. The lead vessel was enormous, easily 3 kilometers long, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements and armor plating thick enough to shrug off asteroid impacts. Behind it came another, and another, and another. 12 massive warships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation, their hulls painted in stark white, with prominent red crosses that gleamed like fresh blood against the darkness of space. "Those aren't medical ships," whispered Communications Officer Ral Theta. "Those are warships. Human warships." Thisiskara stared at the display in stunned silence. Each vessel was larger than anything in the Zephyrian fleet. Larger than most Korthak heavy cruisers, but they bore medical symbols, and their identification transponders clearly marked them as hospital ships of the Terran Medical Corps. "I don't understand," Vexthal said, voicing what everyone was thinking. "Why would humans build hospital ships that look like dreadnoughts?" Before anyone could answer, the communication board lit up with an incoming transmission. A human face appeared on the screen, weathered and serious, with steel-gray eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience far beyond humanity's brief time among the stars. "Zephyrian vessels. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Terran Medical Fleet Ship × Hippocrates *. We received your distress call and have come to provide medical assistance. Please transmit coordinates for the most critically injured populations. We'll begin emergency evacuations immediately." Thisiskara found her voice, though it trembled with confusion and hope. "Admiral Chen, we were expecting medical ships, not warships." Admiral Chen's expression didn't change. "These are medical ships, Admiral Thisiskara. The finest hospital ships in the Terran fleet. Each vessel carries enough medical equipment to treat 1 million casualties, surgical suites that can handle the most complex operations, and staff trained in xenobiology for over 200 different species. But the weapons," Thisiskara gestured helplessly at her tactical display, which was highlighting enough firepower to level a small moon. For the first time, Admiral Chen smiled. And there was something in that expression that made Thisiskara's blood run cold. It wasn't cruelty, but rather the quiet confidence of someone who had faced the worst the universe could offer and emerged victorious. "Admiral," Chen said quietly, "in human medicine, we have an ancient principle. First, do no harm. But we also have another principle. One that's equally important. Protect your patients at all costs. These ships aren't just hospitals. Admiral, they're fortresses, and any force that tries to prevent us from saving lives will discover exactly what that means." As if summoned by her words, the tactical display suddenly erupted with new contacts. A Korthak battle squadron, 20 ships strong, was moving to intercept the human fleet. Thisiskara felt her newly kindled hope crumble. The humans had come to help, but they were about to be slaughtered by forces that had crushed the combined fleets of 3 star systems. "Admiral Chen, she said urgently. You need to withdraw immediately. The Korthak have numerical superiority, and their weapons have been analyzed and catalogued. Chen interrupted calmly. Thank you for the warning, Admiral. But we've been studying Korthak tactics and capabilities during our 4-day journey. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to clear the space lanes for our medical operations. The transmission ended, leaving the Zephyrian command crew staring at their screens in stunned silence. On the tactical display, the 12 human hospital ships were moving forward in formation, directly toward the approaching Korthak squadron. They're going to be massacred, whispered Vexthal. Thisiskara said nothing. But deep in her heart, she felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Anticipation. There was something about Admiral Chen's quiet confidence. Something about the way those massive ships moved through space like predators rather than prey, that suggested the next few minutes would be very interesting indeed. The Korthak squadron accelerated to attack speed, their distinctive wedge-shaped hulls gleaming with the energy of charged weapons. They had destroyed hundreds of ships over the past 3 months, and they approached this new threat with the casual arrogance of a pack of wolves confronting a flock of sheep. They were about to learn that sometimes the sheep have very sharp teeth. As the distance between the fleets closed, Thisiskara found herself holding her breath. In a few moments, they would know whether humanity's gift would be salvation or simply another tragedy to add to the long list of their species' sorrows. But for the first time in months, she dared to hope that perhaps, just perhaps, the universe still held surprises that could change everything. The Korthak squadron leader, War Captain Vex Toroth, studied the approaching human ships with predatory satisfaction. His mandibles clicked in amusement as his tactical officer reported the enemy composition. 12 vessels, War Captain. Large configuration but minimal escort fighters. They appear to be some form of support vessel based on their energy signatures and movement patterns. Vex Toroth's 4 eyes gleamed with anticipation. The Korthak Empire had built its reputation on crushing exactly this kind of naive heroism. Another species sending their precious medical ships into a war zone, believing that mercy and healing could somehow triumph over superior firepower and battlefield experience. Target the largest vessel first, he commanded. Let the others watch their flagship burn before we hunt them down one by one. Today we teach these humans the price of interfering in Korthak conquest. The distance closed to weapons range. Korthak plasma cannons charged with hungry energy, their targeting computers painting the human ships with targeting lasers. For a moment, space held its breath. Then the humans opened fire. What happened next shattered every assumption about human military doctrine that the galaxy had formed over the past 50 years. The lead vessel, the Times Hippocrates *, didn't simply fire its weapons. It unleashed a coordinated barrage that spoke of military precision refined over centuries of warfare. Particle beams lanced out with surgical accuracy, each shot calculated not just to destroy but to maximize tactical advantage. The beams didn't scatter randomly across Korthak hulls but struck with devastating precision at specific targeting points. Weapon emplacements, shield generators, engine housings. In seconds, the lead Korthak cruiser was transformed from a predator into helpless prey. But that was only the beginning. Missile pods that had been disguised as medical supply containers opened like deadly flowers, releasing swarms of smart munitions that moved through space with an intelligence that bordered on supernatural. These weren't the crude, overwhelming barrages favored by most military forces. Each missile seemed to know exactly where to strike for maximum effect, weaving through defensive fire with the fluid grace of living creatures. Impossible, breathed Lieutenant Vexthal aboard the Times Mercy's Wing *. Those targeting solutions. No computer system should be able to calculate trajectories that complex in real time. Admiral Thisiskara watched in fascination as the human fleet demonstrated military capabilities that defied conventional understanding. The 12 ships moved in perfect coordination, each vessel covering the other's fire lanes while maintaining formations that maximized their collective firepower. It was like watching a deadly dance performed by partners who had practiced together for decades. How are they doing this? Asked Communications Officer Raltheta. They've only been in space for 50 years. How could they develop tactics this sophisticated? The answer came from an unexpected source. One of Kara's junior tactical officers, a young male named Kethvar, who specialized in military history, suddenly straightened at his station. "Admiral," he said, his voice filled with dawning realization, "I've been studying human historical records since they joined the galactic community. They've been fighting wars for their entire recorded history. Not just small conflicts or territorial disputes, but massive, civilization-ending wars that consumed entire continents." He pulled up holographic displays showing human historical data. In their most recent global conflict alone, they deployed weapons capable of destroying entire cities in single attacks. They fought simultaneously on multiple continents, across multiple theaters, coordinating operations on a scale that most galactic civilizations have never attempted. Kara felt a chill run down her spine as the implications became clear. While most species had developed spaceflight through peaceful exploration and scientific advancement, humanity had reached the stars carrying the accumulated military experience of thousands of years of warfare. They hadn't just learned to fight in space. They had adapted existing expertise that was already horrifyingly sophisticated. The Korthak Squadron was discovering this truth in the most direct way possible. War Captain Vex Toroth's proud formation was disintegrating under the relentless human assault. Ships that had terrorized 3-star systems were being systematically dismantled by opponents who treated space combat like a science rather than an art. "All ships, scatter formation," Vex Toroth commanded, his voice tight with disbelief. "Individual evasive maneuvers. Target their engines and life support systems." But the humans had anticipated this tactic as well. As the Korthak ships broke formation, the human vessels smoothly transitioned to a different configuration, their movements suggesting that they had planned for exactly this response. Smaller ships that had been hidden behind the larger vessels suddenly revealed themselves, fast attack craft that moved through space with predatory efficiency. These weren't the lumbering hospital ships that most species used for medical operations. They were purpose-built combat medical vessels, designed to fight their way into hostile territory, extract casualties under fire, and defend themselves against any force foolish enough to target medical personnel. The lead Korthak cruiser, its weapons destroyed and engines crippled, drifted helplessly as one of the human hospital ships moved alongside it. Instead of delivering a killing blow, the human vessel extended docking tubes and began boarding procedures. "What are they doing?" Vexthal wondered aloud. Admiral Chen's voice crackled over the communication channel, calm and professional despite the ongoing battle. "Zephyrian vessels. This is Admiral Chen. We're beginning emergency medical operations on captured enemy vessels. Please stand by for casualty transfer protocols." Kara stared at her display in amazement. The humans weren't just defeating the Korthak Squadron. They were simultaneously preparing to treat any wounded enemies they found aboard the ships they had disabled. It was a level of tactical and moral complexity that made her head spin. The battle, if it could still be called that, was winding down with shocking speed. Half the Korthak Squadron had been disabled or destroyed, while the remainder was fleeing toward the outer system in complete disarray. Not a single human vessel showed significant damage. But what truly impressed Kara was what happened next. As the last Korthak ships disappeared beyond sensor range, the human fleet immediately transitioned into medical operations mode. The massive vessels that had just demonstrated overwhelming military superiority began deploying equipment that was clearly designed for humanitarian relief. Medical shuttles launched from hidden bays, each one equipped with advanced trauma units and staffed with teams of medical professionals. "Admiral Kara," Admiral Chen's voice returned. "We're ready to begin emergency evacuations from your surface facilities. Our advanced medical teams are analyzing the physiological data you provided, and I'm pleased to report that our surgical protocols have been successfully adapted for Zephyrian biology." "Adapted how quickly?" Kara asked, still trying to process everything she had witnessed. "During our 4-day journey to your system," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "Our medical AI systems worked in conjunction with our xenobiology specialists to develop treatment protocols for the most common trauma injuries. We've also synthesized compatible medications and prepared surgical equipment calibrated for Zephyrian physiology." Kara felt her knees go weak. The humans had not only traveled across hostile space to help strangers, and not only fought their way through a superior enemy force, but they had also spent the entire journey preparing to provide medical care to a species they had never treated before. "We don't understand," she said weakly. "How could you possibly prepare so thoroughly in so little time?" There was a pause before Admiral Chen responded, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of something that might have been sadness. "Admiral, humans have spent thousands of years learning how to heal what war destroys. We've had considerable practice adapting our medical knowledge to new situations under emergency conditions. It's not a skill we're proud of having developed, but it's one we're grateful to be able to share when it can save lives." As if to demonstrate her point, the first wave of human medical shuttles was already approaching the planet's surface. Each craft moved with the confidence of pilots who had performed similar operations countless times before, threading through debris fields and atmospheric turbulence with casual expertise. "Lieutenant Vexthal," Kara called to her aide, "coordinate with the human medical teams. Give them whatever assistance they need." But even as she spoke, she realized that the humans probably wouldn't need much assistance. They had come prepared for every contingency, armed with both the weapons to clear their path and the knowledge to heal whatever damage they found. As reports began streaming in from the surface, Kara felt a growing sense of wonder. The human medical teams weren't just treating injuries. They were performing miracles. Wounded Zephyrians, who had been given up for dead, were being stabilized and transported to the human hospital ships, where surgical teams worked with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. "Admiral," "Communications Officer," Ralph Theta called out, her voice filled with amazement. "I'm receiving reports from Refugee Camp 4. The humans have established a field hospital and are treating patients with injuries we thought were fatal. They're using techniques I've never seen before." "What kind of techniques?" Kara asked. "Microsurgery to repair neural damage, regenerative therapy for severed limbs, psychological trauma treatment that's already showing results." Ralph Theta paused, checking her reports. "Admiral, they're not just healing our people. They're making them better than they were before they were injured." Kara closed her eyes and tried to process this information. She had expected, at best, that the humans might be able to provide basic medical care and perhaps evacuate some of the most critical cases. She had never imagined that they would arrive with the military capability to drive off their enemies and the medical expertise to perform miracles. But perhaps most remarkably, they had done it all with a calm professionalism that suggested this was simply what humans did. They saw suffering, and they ended it. They encountered enemies, and they defeated them. They found problems, and they solved them. It was, Kara realized, exactly what the galaxy needed, but had never dared to hope for. A species that combined the wisdom to heal with the strength to protect those who could not protect themselves. As night fell over Kepler 442b for the first time in months without the sound of falling bombs, Kara allowed herself to believe that perhaps her people had a future after all. 3 days after the human medical fleet's arrival, Admiral Kara stood in the main medical bay of the Times. Hippocrates *, watching something she had never expected to see again, hope in the eyes of her people. The massive hospital ship was a marvel of engineering that defied every assumption she had held about human technology. Medical bays stretched for kilometers through the vessel's interior, each one equipped with adaptive treatment pods that could be reconfigured for dozens of different species' physiologies. The air hummed with the quiet efficiency of medical equipment that seemed decades ahead of anything the galactic community had developed. "The regeneration chambers are working better than we had anticipated," Dr. Sarah Martinez explained as she guided Kara through the ward. The human physician was young by galactic standards, probably no more than 40 standard years. But she moved through the complex medical bay with the confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime mastering her craft. "Our initial concern was that Zephyrian neural tissue might reject the nanite repair protocols, but your species' cellular structure actually responds more readily to regenerative treatment than human tissue does. We've been able to restore functionality to patients with injuries that would have been permanently disabling for humans." Kara paused beside a treatment pod, where a young Zephyrian civilian named Lethandra was sleeping peacefully. 3 days ago, Lethandra had been dying from radiation poisoning, Her internal organs shut down from exposure to a Korthak plasma bomb. Now she was not only alive but completely healthy, her body showing no trace of the damage that had been slowly killing her. How is this possible? Thizkara asked. Even our most advanced medical technology couldn't have repaired damage this extensive. Dr. Martinez smiled, but there was something sad in her expression. Admiral, humans developed regenerative medicine out of necessity. We've fought so many wars, caused so much damage to ourselves and our world, that we had to learn how to fix what seemed unfixable. Every technique we're using here was developed to heal injuries caused by human weapons, human conflicts, human mistakes. She gestured toward a group of medical technicians working with equipment that seemed to blur the line between science and magic. Nanite therapy was developed to treat soldiers exposed to nuclear radiation. Neural regeneration protocols were created to help victims of biological warfare. Psychological trauma treatment became necessary when we realized that the wounds war leaves on the mind can be just as crippling as physical injuries. As they continued through the medical bay, Thizkara began to understand the full scope of what the humans had accomplished. This wasn't just advanced medicine. It was medicine developed by a species that had spent millennia learning from their own capacity for destruction. Dr. Martinez, she said carefully, may I ask a personal question? Of course, Admiral. How does your species live with the knowledge of what you're capable of? I've seen your historical records. The wars, the weapons, the scale of destruction you've inflicted on yourselves. How do you maintain hope? Dr. Martinez was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. When she finally spoke, her voice carried the weight of deep reflection. I think it's because we've learned that the same intelligence that creates weapons can also create healing. The same hands that can destroy can also rebuild. Every doctor, every nurse, every medical technician on this ship is here because we've chosen to use our abilities to preserve life rather than end it. She paused beside another treatment pod, where a Zephyrian child was being treated for injuries that would have been fatal just days earlier. We can't undo our history, Admiral. We can't take back the wars we've fought or the damage we've done, but we can choose what to do with the knowledge we've gained from those mistakes. Every life we save here, every person we heal, is our way of proving that destruction doesn't have to be the end of the story. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent announcement over the ship's communication system. Admiral Chen, to all stations. Incoming transmission from the Galactic Medical Coalition. Priority, Alpha. Thizkara and Dr. Martinez made their way to the command center, where Admiral Chen was receiving a holographic communication from the Coalition's High Council. The three-dimensional images showed representatives from a dozen different species, their expressions ranging from curiosity to outright amazement. Admiral Chen, the lead representative, an elderly Altarian named Wisdom Keeper Veltharis, spoke with the formal tone reserved for official proceedings. We have been monitoring your operations in the Kepler 442 system with great interest. The reports we're receiving seem difficult to verify. Admiral Chen's expression remained neutral. What specific aspects concern you, Wisdom Keeper? Our understanding is that your fleet engaged and defeated a superior Korthak force, while simultaneously conducting large-scale medical evacuations. Furthermore, our medical advisors tell us that the treatment protocols you're using should be impossible to adapt for Zephyrian physiology in such a short time frame. I can provide detailed operational reports and medical documentation, Chen replied calmly. Which specific capabilities would you like me to verify? The Coalition representatives exchanged glances before Veltharis continued. Admiral, humanity has been part of the galactic community for only 50 years. The medical techniques you're demonstrating represent centuries of advanced research. The military capabilities you've displayed exceed anything we've seen from your species previously. How do you explain this apparent contradiction? Thizkara stepped forward, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed the impossible become reality. Wisdom Keeper, if I may speak as the beneficiary of human assistance? Veltharis nodded respectfully. Of course, Admiral Thizkara. Your perspective would be invaluable. The humans didn't develop these capabilities for us, she said, choosing her words carefully. They already possessed them. What they did was adapt existing knowledge and technology to help a species they'd never encountered before. The speed of that adaptation isn't what's remarkable. What's remarkable is that they had such advanced capabilities ready to deploy in the first place. Another council member, a crystalline being from the Sirius system, spoke up with a voice like chiming bells. Admiral This's Kara, are you suggesting that humanity has been concealing military and medical capabilities from the galactic community? Not concealing, Admiral Chen interjected, before This's Kara could respond. Simply not volunteering information that wasn't requested. When humanity applied for membership in the galactic community, we were asked about our scientific achievements, our cultural development, and our commitment to peaceful cooperation. We answered those questions honestly. No one asked about our military capabilities or our experience with large-scale medical operations. The uncomfortable silence that followed this statement spoke volumes about the assumptions the galactic community had made about their newest members. Admiral Chen, Velthara said slowly, are you telling us that humanity has been capable of this level of military and medical intervention throughout your membership in the galactic community? Humanity has been capable of far more than this, Chen replied quietly. What you're seeing here represents a tiny fraction of our actual capabilities, scaled down specifically for a humanitarian mission. We came here to heal, not to conquer, but we came prepared to protect our medical personnel and our patients from anyone who might try to interfere with that mission. The implications of this statement rippled through the council like a shockwave. Species that had viewed humanity as enthusiastic but inexperienced junior members of the galactic community suddenly realized they had been sharing space with a civilization whose true capabilities were completely unknown. May we ask? The Syrian representative chimed carefully. What humanity's full military capabilities actually encompass? Admiral Chen considered the question for a long moment before responding. Council members. Humanity currently maintains a standing fleet of approximately 12,000 combat vessels, ranging from fast attack craft to strategic planetoid bases. Our medical corps operates 600 hospital ships like the ones currently deployed here. We have defensive installations in 17 star systems and strategic alliances with 43 colonies outside galactic community space. The numbers hung in the air like a physical weight. Most galactic community members maintained fleets of dozens or hundreds of ships. The idea that humanity possessed military resources on the scale Chen was describing was almost incomprehensible. But, Chen continued, those capabilities exist to protect human interests and to assist allies when requested. We have no territorial ambitions beyond our current systems, and we have no interest in threatening the peace that the galactic community has worked so hard to maintain. Wisdom Keeper Veltharas spoke into the stunned silence. Admiral Chen, why has humanity never mentioned these capabilities before? Because, Chen said simply, no one ever asked, and because we hoped we'd never need to use them. Humanity has seen enough of war, council members. We've learned what happens when species compete through violence rather than cooperation. We joined the galactic community because we believed in the possibility of a better way. She gestured toward the medical readings streaming across the command center displays, showing the steady improvement of thousands of Zephyrian patients. This is what we prefer to do with our capabilities. Heal instead of harm. Build instead of destroy. Protect instead of conquer. But if someone threatens innocent lives, if someone attacks medical personnel, if someone tries to prevent us from saving people who need help, her voice hardened slightly. Then they discover what 12,000 years of military evolution looks like when it's used to protect rather than to dominate. As the transmission ended and the coalition representatives disconnected to process this new information, This's Kara found herself looking at Admiral Chen with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. Admiral, she said quietly, what happens now? What happens to my people? Chen's expression softened. What happens now, Admiral, is that your people heal. They rebuild. They rejoin the galactic community as equals, not as victims. The Korthak Empire will think very carefully before attacking medical personnel again, and the galaxy will know that humanity stands ready to defend those who cannot defend themselves. She paused, looking out at the stars beyond the command center's viewports. And perhaps, Admiral This's Kara, the galaxy will learn something that humanity discovered long ago. That the greatest strength isn't the ability to destroy your enemies, but the ability to turn them into friends. Some of the Korthak prisoners we're treating in our medical bays are already asking questions about galactic community membership. It turns out that showing mercy to your enemies can be more effective than showing them force. As Admiral This's Kara returned to her own ship to oversee the ongoing rescue operations, she carried with her a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't the young, naive species that everyone had assumed them to be. They were something far more complex and potentially far more powerful. A civilization that had learned from its own mistakes and chosen to use its strength in service of life rather than death. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. But perhaps more importantly, the galaxy would never have to fear that medical ships would go undefended, that humanitarian missions would go unprotected, or that cries for help would go unanswered. Humanity had shown that they were ready to be guardians as well as healers. And for species like the Zephyrians, that made all the difference in the universe.